Hey there, truth seekers. I'm Larry Litton, your guide through the maze of modern politics and power dynamics on liberty, leadership, and lies. Each episode will challenge the narratives, expose the lies, and celebrate the leaders who champion true liberty. Get ready to question, learn, and maybe even change your mind. So let's dive into the truth together. Good Monday morning, folks. Just a quick intro to this week's episode, which is the second of a three-part interview that Professor Stanley Ridgley joined me for. I hope you enjoyed last week's show and then it opened your eyes a bit to the con job that is DEI in higher education. Professor Ridgley informed me after last week's episode that the book we discussed is now out on audio format. After we conclude part 3, I will be joined on the program by Dr. Carol Lieberman. She's a board-certified forensic psychiatrist, a 3-time Emmy-honored TV personality, and best-selling author. She is known as America's psychiatrist. She provides fearless, no-nonsense psychological insights into crime, politics, media hysteria, and cultural trends. So look for her to be on the show on the 28th of April. For now, though, let's continue with the interview with Professor Stanley Ridgley and gain some more insight into the perversion of higher education in America that is diversity, equity, and inclusion. Let me tell you, it is quite a racket, folks. So let's take a stand in the arena again with Professor Ridgley this week, folks, and get on with the show. Welcome to Liberty, Leadership, and Lies, the podcast where we unravel the complex web of politics, power, and deception. Each week, we dive into the stories behind the headlines, exploring how liberty is eroded and the selfishness of our political leaders, as well as the lies that shape our world. Join us as we dissect the truth from fiction by examining the tactics used by the new aristocracy, the political class, at the local, state, and national levels of government as we dare to challenge the status quo. Get ready for thought-provoking discussions, exclusive interviews, and a journey into the heart of what really drives our society. Liberty, Leadership, and Lies, where your understanding of the world begins to change. Tune in every Monday morning and prepare to see beyond the veil.
Yeah, exactly.
And you've seen it filtered down though into the primary education space as well. I mean,
Yes,
those people that have been brought up or taught in the college environment are now teaching that same stuff
yeah.
in elementary and junior highs and high schools all over the country. And in fact, a lot of the curriculum companies, the organizations that put together curricula to sell to public education systems, that's all infused throughout that.
Yeah.
And
you're exactly right. You characterize it perfectly, and it's not an accident. As I write in my first book, well, I've written 4 books, but the 2 that are most relevant here, my first book we're talking about is Brutal Minds. This came out 2 years ago. I detail the funnel of teaching programs from education schools, the abysmal. These are the buck privates on our college campuses. No one really cares for the education schools. They're kind of like they pay the bills, they bring in people, pay the bills, that kind of thing. Well, they've been taken over and have been taken over by crypto Maoists and crypto Maoist theory, education theory, based on a fellow by the name of Paulo Freire. Let me show you a picture of the guy. This is not his famous book. That's Paulo Freire. Okay, I mean, he's from Brazil. He's long ago passed away, but his famous book was Pedagogy of the Oppressed from 1970. And the folks in the education schools bought into this. They're far leftists, most of them, and they said, we can't use the M word. We can't use Marx. We just can't do that. It's not safe to do that now. But we can use the F word, Freire. Paulo Freire, that character I just showed you, is a Brazilian Marxist, Maoist. I mean that quite literally, a Maoist from the 1970s. And he wrote this book, Pedagogy of the Oppressed, which is basically cribbing Mao Zedong's educational theory. We're very familiar with the Chinese idea of thought reform, the idea that you can re-educate people who oppose you ideologically, where the Soviets would shoot you in the back of the head. The Chinese said, well, we can reform people with rectification campaigns, with re-education campaigns, put enough pressure on people. We can, brainwash people or inflict what we call thought reform to bring these people and turn them into allies. And so that's what Paulo Freire was talking about. He was also talking about people understanding the idea of critical consciousness. It's called consciência social, which is the Portuguese word for critical consciousness. This means, Larry, that you and we have false consciousness. And critical consciousness means that we need to elevate our perceptions with critical theory, critical race theory, DEI, so that we can peer into the contradictions of society, the relationships between power and privilege. And once we understand, in other words, all we have to do is agree with what they're saying, and that means that we'll have critical consciousness. Well, this is straight out of Mao Zedong educational theory. Look at his famous essay from the 70s. It's called on Contradictions. And this is pure Maoism that has been kind of laundered through Paulo Freire. And so education school folks revere this guy. They love him. And they're covered because it's not Marx, but he's really kind of like second-rate Marx. They say, oh, it's not Marx, it's Freirean. It's Freirean. Now, back to the original point, these are the service members of service that are going into our K through 12. They're not subject matter trained. They are trained in education theory.
Mm-hmm.
Lord, I wish we had the subject matter people, science and math and chemistry, things like that. Subject matter experts. That's not what people are doing now. These teachers are being trained in education theory. And when we say that, that's a proxy for this crypto-Maoist nonsense by Paulo Freire. And you tell them this, they won't know what you're talking about.
Right.
Because very few of them actually read Freire, the primary source. What they read and are taught is like what secondary sources tell you about Freire. Now think about how this is being passed down in laundry. You've got Freire translating Mao and Marx into for education theory, and then you've got these secondary folks in the school saying, well, you don't have to read the Freire, you can listen to what I'm saying. Mm-hmm. And so it's kind of passed through these several filters. What we have, as you said at the very beginning, K through 12, there are cadres of folks going out into K through 12, and they're propagating this nonsense that they have learned in the education schools. That's a terrible situation.
Yeah, and I think what Lincoln said it right. We're never going to be destroyed by an enemy from without. We're growing our own enemy within.
Yeah, and good luck, making, revealing them as the enemy. I've had such a hard time with these folks. In fact, I'm writing an article right now on the intransigence of people who are basically the three monkeys with the hear no evil, see no evil, speak no evil. These people are absolutely invested in their view of DEI and what it means when it doesn't really mean what they think it means. And this is a wonderful rhetorical trick, sleight of hand that the DEI people, they've left it so, they picked three words that sound so wonderful. They have positive valence, and they allow you to really fill that decanter with whatever you want to. And so what happens is that when people who invest their narcissism and their virtue and their high ground moral superiority into this decanter of DEI, here's what DEI means. It's justice. It is social justice. And it's really none of those things. It's just what they've imagined. And so when you attack DEI or simply state the obvious, state the factual aspects of it, they get angry. They get angry, call you racist. They call you a bigot. They call you all these things because you don't agree with this imaginary DEI that they've contrived for themselves, because you are essentially attacking them. Because what you're attacking, what you're saying, they're accepting that as an attack on their moral high ground, on their integrity, on their view of themselves as enlightened beings, because they've made it up for themselves. They've made it all up. It has no content whatsoever with regard to what is actually in DEI exposed. If you want to understand DEI and what's wrong with it, and so it never comes back, then I suggest that you read DEI Exposed. It's a fun book, by the way, because
Absolutely.
yeah, I'd like to think it's funny. I've had lots of good reviews of it. The fact is that these people are strange, weird people. They are, and all I do is I let them speak for themselves, and you can figure out whether they're weird or not.
They're almost like politicians. They couldn't be successful in the private sector, so they're going to go into the academia.
Mhm. Well, yeah, but the fact is that they don't have to. It's like Larry Arndt. He's the president of Hillsdale College. He
Mhm.
said, go into education if you want to. Just it's fun. It's easy. He said, be a DEI person. You don't have to know anything. You really don't. And this
Yeah.
is why you find them saying all the time. You'll hear this. If you haven't already noticed yourself,
Mhm.
is they do the work. This is so important. We're doing the work of anti-racism. Where this work is important. They always talk about this work, doing the work. It's
Right.
they can't really describe what the work actually is. There's actually a portion segment of DEI Exposed which allows them these DEI these diversity officers to speak for themselves, and they're describing how they ought to be compensated and what they should do to be compensated. And they said, well, we should be these traditional measures of productivity don't really apply to us. Our work is amorphous, it's important, it's high toned. We should be paid for our value that we bring to the university, for who we are. You're being paid for who you are. They say this. They say we ought to be also mindful and have self-care. We need to take more naps. We need to take more naps. I read that myself. I was reading that. I said, this can't mean what they're saying. This got to have to be some acronym, NAP, right?
Mhm.
No, they mean like taking short sleep sessions. And they said, what would they have subscribed to what they call the nap bishop. I can't remember her name right now. I don't want to put her name on there anyway. The nap bishop who runs group nap sessions. And these DEI diversity officers are completely endorsing this and saying, this is a wonderful way to recharge your batteries after all of the contretemps and challenges that we face as diversity officers. We need to take these group naps. And it's bizarre. This is the kind of topsy-turvy world. We want you to pay us for who we are because we're diversity officers, and we want to take more breaks and take naps together.
And not produce anything other than
Yeah,
self-loathing.
you can't. What are they going to produce? There's no result that we're going to see. I look at it this way. I have actually challenged these people in public sessions. I said, okay, you claim that my university is guilty of racism, systemic racism, in institutional racism of all sorts. Okay, that's what you say. Okay, right now, here and now on a public platform, tell us the people, the processes, the procedures, and the programs that you consider racist, so we can begin fixing that problem. Tell us, name some names. Who are they? Who are they? What are the programs? What are the procedures? What name policies? What are they? What are they? If they're you name them and we can have a discussion, we can fix them. How about that? No, no,
It never
nothing.
happened.
Never happen. It won't happen because they're actually fearful of actually having to produce evidence, having to produce proof. And this is really traditional conspiracy theory behavior. Conspiracy theorists never want to answer any questions, and they will. And I've been accused of this, believe it or not. If I'll say, how about you give us some examples, some evidence, have some proof of what you're saying by doing what I just said. And I was accused of being part of this oppressive atmosphere at my university. Basically, in other words, I'm part of the conspiracy. If you ask a question, he's like, say, well, it's very like, you're an alien. I said, well, I'm not an alien. They said, well, that's exactly what an alien would say. Look, there's no answer to the conspiracy. These are conspiracy theorists writ large. If you question them, you ask any mild criticism, you eventually mark yourself as being the enemy and part of the conspiracy. And I'm using this the work from Jovan Byford, Serge Moscovici, Daniel Pipes, and also Cass Sunstein and Adrian Vermeule at Harvard University, who have written a lot about conspiracy theory. DEI Exposed talks about the conspiracy mindset of the folks who are on the campuses doing this kind of teaching. They are they are basically characterized by dark triad psychological traits. You're familiar with that, right? I'm sure you are. You probably heard dark triad.
Yeah.
I think it's really a Hollywood name for it. This comes out of psychology around the early 2000s. The idea that these people, con artists, who are going to try to manipulate you by making you feel like a victim, I'm sorry, a villain, and they are the victims that you are now going to pay them some sort of reparations. That's called the a resource extraction strategy, virtuous victimhood. But this is the idea of the dark triad. Who would do such a thing? Well, people who have these personality traits clustered together. It's Machiavellianism or manipulative behavior. It is narcissism, the idea that you're great and no one is recognizing your greatness. No one is recognizing you. You are not getting the respect you deserve. I think I just gave an example of that. Say, well, we need to be paid for who we are. And then the final characteristic is psychopathy. The idea, unemotionless, the idea that your actions you don't care about your actions and what kind of a result you get against someone else. You put all three of those together, and you've got a con artist, you've got a DEI diversity officer.
Right. And I think the problem with they know, or at least they inherently know deep down that if they give a specific,
Yeah,
uh, that if that problem's solved, then their existence is no longer required. Hey, we solved that problem. We don't need you anymore. And
yeah.
so they will never give a specific problem or a specific solution to a specific problem because once fixed, they're out of business.
Yeah,
So they got
that's
to
the
keep the
nature.
con going.
Got to keep that money flowing, right? Yeah.
Right.
There's something called that they call a racial climate. That's how they evaluate what's going on the campus, a racial climate, and they do use all kinds of tools to evaluate this racial climate, which usually are yes, they're really unscientific, even in the social science sense, where you're asking people, "What do you think? What do you think of the racial climate? Is it getting better? Is it getting worse?" Well, they don't define the racial climate, and they don't give a scale that is used by everyone. You kind of come up with a scale in your own mind, and then they aggregate this and say, "Well, of course, the climate's getting worse," and they create the imaginary racial incidents called racial microaggressions, and then use this to pump up the number of racial instances on campus. Racial microaggression, that's saying something to someone like, "Hey, where are you from?"
Right.
If you're a white person telling us, "Where are you from?" Or, "Hey, America's a land of opportunity." That's a racial microaggressions. Well, you can always pull yourself up by your bootstraps. No, no, racial microaggressions. You see how that works. And suddenly you're ticking off these more and more and more of these racial incidences. And then you say, well, look at all these racial instances. We got a bad racial climate here. But here there's a group out, and again, going back to the money and the grift, there's a group out in California, the University of Southern California, a fellow by the name of Sean Harper. He used to be here in Philadelphia where I teach. And he's running a center for racial equity or something like that. His team will come out to your university, and for $12,000, they'll evaluate the racial climate. Quick and dirty kind of thing. And they evaluate you on 5 criteria, and they'll give you a report. This is only beginning. The $12,000 buys you a report on these 5 metrics, and you'll be, you got problems here and you've got problems here. It's very soft and squishy metrics. And they say, okay, well, we can fix those problems because here's the problem. And now here's our module of learning that can help you fix that problem. They'll give you a number and a thing and show you how you can fix the problem with their module. Their module costs $40,000, and it consists of 8 2-hour Zoom sessions. That's it. So you get
Wow.
8 2-hour Zoom sessions for 40 grand with one or more of their advisors, who are all the usual suspects. These people, you start reading enough of this stuff, you start seeing the same people again and again. Nolan Cabrera is one of them. Tabia Chavus Sellers, the person I told you who was in Michigan receiving the big bucks,
Mhm.
she's one of the consultants. Sean Harper himself is one of the consultants. And so you have this kind of a pass around circle of friends that's ensuring that everyone's getting a nice slice of the largesse. It's good work. It's good work, I tell
Wow.
you.
I think I might need to switch careers here.
Maybe you come up with your own survey.
Right? So, in your book, DEI Exposed, you critique, I mean, we've just been talking about the pseudoscience behind it.
Yeah.
How do you think conservatives can use this to dismantle its credibility in the academic debates?
Well, I tell you that you can say academic debates. You tend to think about it on a stage or something like that.
Right.
What happens is these folks have been given a lot of leeway when they say, well, DEI is needed because of the inequities in American society, because you had, they always go back to, slavery and go Jim Crow. And the thing is, we have to, and I would tell conservatives to watch for this because Selma, the Selma March, you've got
Mhm.
Emmett Till, the death of Emmett Till, you got Rosa Parks, you've got the entire sorry legacy of Jim Crow in the South. You go even farther back to the lynchings. You go back to Reconstruction and the undermining of that a short period of time when it was great promise when Frederick Douglass was on the scene and he was talking about it. That's not going to change. Okay, those events are not going to change. So you need to be aware that they're going to go back to now George Floyd, the killing of George Floyd in 2020, in March of 2020. That's not going to change. That won't change. The American justice system dealt with that. You may or may not agree with the result of that, or Derek Chauvin and what happened to him. You may or may not agree, but the fact was that the system worked the way it was supposed to work. But they keep going back to George Floyd, and there's not a DEI session today that doesn't talk about that. It doesn't talk about the racial reckoning that the United States went through because of the unfortunate death of George Floyd. You never want to see anyone killed in the street certainly not by a law enforcement officer, but this guy's no saint. He doesn't need to be sanctified and murals built to his name. It was a bad scene, and his life was taken. I don't know what took his life, whether it was the fentanyl or whether it was the knee on his neck. I simply don't know. But I'm willing to believe that the justice system really was put into play and worked. Now, those events that I just described to you, the George Floyd all the way back to Jim Crow, that's not going to change. So when people pull those instances out and talk about the legacy of such and such legacy, we need to ignore that. So well, that's all well and good, but what about right now? What about the last 70 years? What about let's start with the U.S. Civil Rights Act, 1964. Let's start with that and the progress that has been made since that point in time. Let's talk about the actual reality of American society today and how people are treating each other. What are the pressure points? What are the groups that are causing dissension in American society? Do we have a race problem that is getting better or getting worse? And what are the causes of that? Not going back, say, there was, Rosa Parks and there were George Wallace stood in the schoolhouse door. All that's true. And you can say that as many times as you want to. And it's not going to go away yeah. And it's something that you want to tell people that, yeah, this is the way it was. Let's look at the photographs. Let's learn about why it happened. Let's learn about those people and why they did what they did. There's absolutely no problem with that. It's been going on for quite some time. But what we have here with DEI is something completely different. It's an interpretation of this, and it's taken this primitive Manichaean, I say Manichaean, I'm referring to the teachings of the Iranian cleric Mani over 1,000 years ago, that divides the world into two categories, good and evil, and marks oppressors and oppressed, exploiters and exploited. And this is what they have accepted as their worldview. And they're not good enough. They're not satisfied with that. They want to push that on our kids. They want to push that on our faculty. real academics being told what to do and how to behave by these fake academics. They have basically drafted some of the forms and lingo of American academia to try to poop their lift up their doctrine and
A
try to
little
make it
patina
sound.
of credibility.
Well, it's like we purged this nonsense from the university 300 years ago.
Mhm.
Alchemy, astrology, pseudoscience, phrenology. We got rid of the superstition. All this nonsense, like turning lead into gold,
Right.
all of that bullshit, basically. And we got rid of it. And I use the term advisedly, that term. Harry Frankfurt, the Princeton, departed Princeton philosopher, wrote a very famous article on bullshit and talked about it's different than lying. It's basically proposing a story that you may well believe. That's not true. It's gaslighting, basically. And the idea is that we have admitted these charlatans, these mountebanks, these fake academics into the university and given them carte blanche and given them lots of money. And we need to get them the heck out of here. They get them out.
Right.
Uh,
They've invited the alchemists and the snake oil salesmen into positions of
yes,
credibility on the campuses.
yes,
And
yes.
it filters, like I said, all the way down to K through 12.
It's like having a site, we're going to have a department of essential oils, on the college campus here. We're going to work in multidisciplinary essential oils and astrology. Major in that.
Oh, and
Uh,
don't forget underwater basket weaving.
Underwater basket weaving, gender studies, all you want, all of the things that are going to not make our world a better place to live, not increase anyone's life expectancy, and probably put you on the dole because you can't get a job.
Right. Okay, now, so let's talk about the decline of free speech on college campuses. We've seen that all across the country, especially here in the last year
Yeah.
or after the attack on Israel. Uh, and you touch on it in your book, but
Mhm.
how has it impacted the students' ability to push back against this DEI dogma?
Well, you'd be hard pressed to find anyone's going to push back on it. You have to have a stomach for that kind of thing. To sit in a classroom where an authority figure is in the front of the classroom. I'm talking about the college classroom now, not these seminars taught by these fake academics. And you've got some character up there. And ironically, I should say, it's not people who work in actual disciplines like political science or social, like business or economics. It's people who are in English. They teach English lit, and suddenly they want to be a political expert. They want to talk about Marxism. They want to talk about oppression. They want to talk about the problems, social problems of the day. They give writing assignments to students on social justice issues rather than, let's do a random essay on social justice issues. Not on, say, the meaning of life, not on the essential great questions that have, nettled the intellects of our great philosophers over time. Going back, Plato, and you're going David Hume and John Locke, and say, none of that. No, they're going to do some social justice. Our writing center here even assigns those kinds of essays. So how are you going to, if you're a student, how are you going to battle that when it seems like it's all around you? And the reason it's all around you is because that's planned. And you say, well, that sounds like a conspiracy, Dr. Ridgley. No, it's not. It's a strategy. It's a strategy, and I name it in Brutal Minds. It's called milieu management. That's what they call it. They have a message, a social justice message, they being the student affairs people who outnumber, they're liberals, and they outnumber conservatives 12-1 on the college campus. I can give you the source of that in a moment if you like. They are the ones crafting this milieu management strategy, which means messaging students 24/7 in the dorms, in the dining halls, certainly in the classrooms, certainly in the guest speakers that are invited to the campus, and then the discussion groups, the clubs, all of these things. The social justice message in its various forms is propounded 24/7. So students can fight back against this. It's no secret of how to fight back. And in my previous book, Brutal Minds, I give number one, red flags to describe threat situations that you find yourself in, and when I say fight back, how to shield yourself against this assault on you, because it is an assault. It's a three-stage assault following the MIT sociologist, uh, social psychologist, I should say, Kurt Lewin. He developed the idea of group therapy. He's the father of group therapy. If you're looking for to find out, and he's also the guy who coined the term re-education. He's the guy. It was not pejorative at the time. His name again is Dr. Kurt Lewin. Good guy. I mean, smart guy, and did his work in the late 30s and 40s. And he came up with a three-step plan to change someone's belief system. It's called unfreezing the belief system, changing the belief system, and then refreezing the belief system. And I would say that the social justice cadre on the college campus have explicitly taken this formula, this three-stage formula. It's one of those things where, oh, are you making this up? Are you exaggerating again? No, they cite him. They say, we're taking this and we're using this. We're using this to train our students here. We're going to unfreeze their current belief system. We're going to create a sense of vertigo, make them vulnerable to this and question what they've always believed, and then install this new belief system of critical consciousness. And then we're going to refreeze it by giving them work and activities to do the work so that they don't backslide into their previous belief system. This is what they say. This is what they do. Marianne Adams, Leanne Bell are two of the worst. They their book is Teaching for Social Justice, Teaching for Diversity and Social Justice. It's come out in 4 editions. It's like a handbook that is used in colleges and universities. They even use it at the high school level. The latest edition was 2023. They actually use this 3-stage method to break down a student's belief system. Now, the key to this, that was all prefaced to how a student can protect himself or herself. But this doesn't work. Everything I just laid out, it doesn't work if you don't trust these people. It doesn't work. And so what we find is that there is an incredible effort, especially in freshman orientation, an incredible effort to get students to trust the facilitator. These student affairs oriented, some of them are DEI people as well. And they will use terms like this. These are quotes from them. We want you to make yourself vulnerable. We want you to self-disclose. We want you to feel comfortable self-disclosing. We are going to create a safe space for you. And so you're thinking, just if you're young, you're a student away from home for the first time. Oh. And they employ what is called love bombing. What is love bombing? This is a term from the cult literature. So it's what Moonies do. What the unification church. When you go to a recruiting session for Moonies, they will love bomb you. And this is creating a situation of unconditional acceptance. All your jokes are funny. Your fashion sense is amazing. Wow, what a beautiful singing voice you have. What a beautiful speaking voice you have. That is, wow. And everyone's laughing. And recruits come out of this saying, I've never felt more accepted in my life, even in my own family. But of course, your own family, your parents have to discipline you on occasion. That's why so everything you do is considered marvelous. In like fashion, this is what student affairs people do on the college campuses whenever they're bringing these new students in. Oh, it's a wonderful, lots of fake smiles, people grinning too long, laughing, talking to the parents and then sending them on their way. And then you say, well, we want to trust. We want to establish a principle of trusting each other. I say, no way. I tell students, don't trust these people. Anyone who is desperate to get you to trust them is a con artist. That's the whole idea of the confidence artist. That's how it operates. You give trust where it's not warranted. And once you do that, you begin to disclose private personal information that they had no business knowing. And then they know your weaknesses, then they can attack you, and they will in their struggle sessions or their orientation sessions. That's how it works.
Absolutely. Well, folks, that'll be a wrap for part 2. Be sure to tune in next week for the conclusion of our interview with Professor Ridgley. As always, please give this episode a thumbs up on Rumble and YouTube, as well as share the content on your social media accounts. I look forward to being with you again next week. And this week's wisdom from God's Word comes to us from the book of 1 Corinthians, chapter 16, verse 13. Be on your guard. Stand firm in the faith. Be courageous. Be strong. While President Trump and his administration have made great progress in removing DEI from many institutions of both public and private, there is still a lot of work to do. And since this is just another front of the left's war on freedom and liberty, it requires all of us to stand guard against it. It requires us to be strong and courageous. Until next week, let's take a stand in the arena together, folks. Reveille, it's time to wake up.